Thursday, March the 13th. I was in the office. I just finished a phone call with a client who wanted us on site the following week. An ordinary day. The phone rang. I could see it was Ian, my contracts manager. Just the man I wanted to talk to. I picked up. Any chance of men next week, I asked. He didn't answer the question. He just said, Brian's fallen. They say he's in a bad way. I said, I'm coming now.
I had one of the lads ring me from site who just very calmly said, Brian's fallen. I said, well, how bad is it? And he just went very quiet and said, bad.
I didn't know how Brian was as I drove. This was 3/4 of an hour after the fall. It was too long. Why wasn't he on his way to hospital? I had a strange metallic taste like blood in my mouth. My mobile started to ring. I could see it was Ian. I pulled over to the side of the road. I knew what was coming. He's dead. He's fucking dead. Brian's dead.
My first thought was Helen and his youngest son. And how do I ever tell anybody that this has happened?
The site was quiet when I got there. It should have been a hive of activity. I was met, escorted straight into the main office. I went to tell the on-site supervisor that we were cancelling the contract. I opened my mouth to tell him, but instead I broke down. And other people began to cry. I was making people cry.
And I can't really remember the words I put it into. I mean, how do you tell anybody? And I just said, I'm really, really sorry. I said, there's been an accident at work. Brian's had a fall. I'm sorry to have to tell you he's died.
So what went wrong? I'll explain a little bit about what's happened on the day that Brian fell. The team were completing a job from the previous winter. The men were working on the gantry around 30 metres up a chimney, rust-proofing bolts. The task was fairly straightforward. Take out a section of gantry, lower down a bosun's seat, prepare and paint the bolts, and then descend to the lower gantry. 6 men in the team. I want to stress that for steeplejacks, this is about as straightforward as work gets. Brian had just removed the section of gantry. He unclipped. He walked around to the other side of the gantry to fetch his bosun's chair. He came back around. And then he stepped through the opening he just created. Brian fell 30 metres to his death, and so ended. 32 years being a steeplejack, being a husband, and being a dad.
So Brian was the most experienced lad on the firm. He'd had many years. I'd worked under him as a mate before on other companies, and he was vastly experienced in what he did.
He was an absolute excellent guy. It was a pleasure to work with. He was calm-mannered. It was always helping you if you struggled with something. Obviously, he had that much knowledge. He could, point you in the right direction. Do it this way rather than that way. It's a lot better. I learned so much from him.
What was going on in Brian's mind, I don't suppose we'll actually ever know, really, but he was very comfortable at work, so he wasn't worried. He had the handle on the job.
That's when she said to me, did he clip off?
I told my wife, and she was as shocked as I was. She just couldn't, but she just wouldn't believe that someone has actually fallen in our firm and died as a result of it. It's just, she just couldn't understand it. She actually asked me directly there and then, do you clip off and all that? Do you use your safety gear?
Brian was experienced, he was middle-aged, in charge of other people. There was no time pressure, no pressure of any kind. So what made him, of all people, take a shortcut?
Before the accident happened, I had got absolutely zero idea of what happened if you'd had an accident. It never even crossed my mind. I knew that we as a company did every possible training that was available to be done. In fact, sometimes the lads moaned, why we're having to do this again, because you have to.
The person out on the street generally thinks that you're innocent until proven guilty. But actually with health and safety law, the simple way to say it is that you're actually guilty until you can prove that you're innocent.
If you defend yourself, and I was determined to defend myself, you risk looking uncaring. But if you don't, it's an automatic admission of guilt. What I wasn't prepared for, despite all my work with safety groups, was the way that the investigation and the prosecution would take over my whole life. 3 years in which I was able to do virtually nothing other than process material for the HSE and for the defence.
My experience in every case I know of is that the senior leader concerned, either the managing director or the director or the senior manager that's involved, is very, very, very strongly impacted by the event. Sometimes when it first happens, they're so involved in making operational decisions that it seems as if it's not affecting them. It actually affects them progressively, over time, massively.
I felt like a criminal. I really felt like a criminal that, you know, what have we done?
When I was questioned by the HSE, it was very daunting. It wasn't a pleasant experience by any means, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, to be fair. They do want to know the ins and outs of everything, which is part of what they have to do, I know that. But I did feel that the questions were sort of, I don't know, towards you guilty before anything's really looked at. So we went into a room, he explained that it would be recorded, everything's written down. He would show me evidence. So yeah, it probably is like a police interview.
I felt so sorry for them, you know, they'd lost a close work colleague, and I think they felt themselves, I don't know, but the looks on their faces, you felt as if they felt, this is my fault. After all the interviews were done, we continued working. Obviously we had to talk to clients and tell them what had happened and things like this, but we continued working and everything just went totally quiet. We heard nothing, and you started to think, what's going off? You know, is something happening, or are we going to be charged with anything? And when we actually got the letter, Keith was out on the road and I received, it just came as a normal letter through the post to say, you know, we were being charged with offences against health and safety. And it just, I thought, well, could they not have just picked up the phone? I felt very much it was an us and them.
Then Colin happened. This time I was out and about when the call came. Ian again. Colin had fallen. He wasn't moving.
I got the call again with the second accident, sat at my desk. The names always came up on the phone, so I saw it was one of the lads. Never even entered my head. Good morning, you know, how are you? And he said this particular lad had had a fall. And I said, he's what? He said, he's had a fall. I said, how the hell's he had a fall? Yeah, I said, he was with Brian. What the? I was so angry and so upset that, you know, less than 2 years after one of their close workmates has been killed, that this lad's had a fall. How the hell did it happen?
Nottingham Castle is on the top of a large sandstone outcrop, and periodically we clear rubble and loose material from the rock face. One of our men decided to abseil down from a flat bank without his helmet, without using the second rope, and without engaging his panic grab device. It was a quick trip to get a cup of tea. He fell and he was injured. This was an individual who had been through college training to MVQ level 2. He had been with me for over 10 years. He had retrained on rope access only 6 weeks previously and gained accommodation for 100% pass rate. And this was someone who had been there when Brian was killed.
Then I started to think, we can give them the training, we can show them how it's done, we can give them everything. But at the end of the day, it's like if I drive down the road, it's up to me to put my seatbelt on, and if I have an accident and get killed because I didn't put it on, well, that surely is showing people that I'm not actually bothered what happens to me. I'm not bothered who has to pick up the pieces. And I felt these two lads now have done something which was, both of them were totally against the rules and both knew they were against the rules. And here I am again having to tell a wife. I sat in the office and I put my head in my hands and I said to a couple of girls in the office, I can't do this anymore. Now, every time the phone rang, I couldn't pick it up. It was like, I can see it's one of the, like, oh, what if somebody's had an accident?
The second accident changed everything. My wife, June, who took the phone call, decided the stress was such that she could no longer continue in the business. The accident was, of course, added to the HSE investigation, and we were told that we would be prosecuted for this too. After 6 weeks, the individual concerned was fit enough to return to work. I interviewed him, and I dismissed him for gross misconduct. I realised that now, trying to defend the prosecution was useless. We had to plead guilty and hope that the company could survive, and that I could stay out of prison. Another 18 months passed before the trial. 18 months of worry, uncertainty, everything on hold. 18 months of having gangs go out and waiting for a phone call. 18 months of compiling material, explaining to clients. 18 months of waiting. In the end, we survived. We were fined £100,000 and £32,000 in costs. At the end of the day, whether it seems fair or not, the law will hold the boss to account when things go wrong, as I discovered to my cost.